Welcome, everybody, to 19's Impact on Medical Education, dealing with challenges webinar held by European Medical Students Association Medical Education Pillar. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening from anyone who's around the world. Today, we will be talking about, as mentioned, COVID-19's impact on medical education with our guest, Lawrence Sherman, on a basic of few questions. And also there will be question and answers part. Also, there are some tips and tricks that Lawrence would like to tell us. So thank you again for coming here. So I will not talk too much. I will give the word to Lawrence. Lawrence, right now you're the presenter.
Thank you, Isan. Hello, everybody. It is very nice to have been invited to talk to you guys. And just so you know, I've spent most of my career, as I'll tell you in a moment, in continuing education. Don't always get the opportunity to work with students. So this is really exciting for me. And I really hope that it's helpful and impactful for you. And you'll see we'll give you some opportunity to share with us during the webinar and after the webinar. Now, I don't know how many of you are using Twitter, but I created a hashtag for EMSA MedEd. So if you want to tweet about this session or after this session and tweet with me, and I'll give you my Twitter handle shortly, I'll make sure that I respond to all your questions. And it'll be interesting to follow up with you guys to see if you do anything as a result of this webinar. But that picture in the upper right-hand corner is what I was in 1988. And so that's a memory of me. And so I walked in your shoes at one. But for the last 26 years, I've been a medical educationalist. And I focus on continuing medical education, continuing professional development, and interprofessional continuing education. And I think part of the future for all of us is team-based learning and team-based experience. So that also reminds me to tell you that Mother Nature and Father Time sometimes play jokes on us because that's what I used to look like. So very interesting, very fun, a lot of fun. So I'm currently president of Meducate Global, which is a global organization assessing healthcare education systems around the world and helping to develop health professional educations around the world. I also hold an international development role with AME, the Association for Medical Education in Europe. And I know some of you have been involved in the student task force, and I'm sure most of you are aware of AME. But there's a lot of really cool resources available there for faculty. But we always love to get the students involved as early as possible so that those of you with an interest in medical education, we certainly want to help you along the way. You'll notice I stole the pictures of Iram and Isan from the website. They are my capable assistants in this endeavor today. And I really enjoy interactivity and engagement. And I don't know if any of you have ever seen me present live, but I really thrive in a face-to-face environment. But in this COVID-19 era, we're having to do more and more of these virtual presentations. And I'm trying to model for you that there's ways for faculty and ways for all of us to engage using digital technology. So I love interactivity, I love engagement, but we have rules to follow. And so if you want to ask a question or say something, submit comments into the chat box, and Isan and Iram are monitoring that. If there's something urgent, like my screen wasn't being shared, they'll interrupt. Otherwise, there are times that I've built in here for them to bring some of your comments and questions in. And certainly follow up is welcome. You know, I tried to take a lot of what we do in the continuing education world and bring it in here. And a lot of what we try to do in continuing education is follow up with our learners to see what changes they've made as a result of the education provided. So I'd love to hear from you. And I'd love to hear from you on Twitter or by email. And if you need to email me, you can send them into the EMSA folks and they'll pass them along. But please, please, let's engage. So we've built some polling questions in, and we're going to use a very interesting method. We have Google Forms that'll be sent out to you through a link in the chat box, and we'll ask you to vote, and then Isan is going to tell me what the results are. I personally struggled a little bit with the polling technology within WebEx. It's the first time I'm using WebEx to present, but I want to make sure that I understand who you are, and you'll see throughout we have a few polling questions so that I get a sense of what your needs are. So Isan, I'm sure you're sending out that link in the chat box now, and this will give me a sense of who's a more junior student, who's a more senior student, and how many people watching aren't a student. So I'm hoping that you can fill that form out now. Isan, are you monitoring that?
Yes, right now I sent the link to chat box. Everyone can fill from that. So let's see a couple of minutes to let people fill the form.
Absolutely. And just so you guys know, this was Isan's idea around for my struggle with the technology. And I'm usually a technological sort of happy person. And so my struggle with this is collaboration between Isan and me. And we worked this out, and hopefully this will work. And I thought, Isan, it was a great idea that you came up with.
You're welcome. Actually, yeah, like hard times require good solutions, let's say, as we see during this pandemic. And actually, that was another big thing from our side. And thank you for your kind words. I can say that.
All right. Do we have any results yet, my friend?
I'm checking that right now. So right now we have 22 responses. So we can wait a minute too, since we have 34 participants right now. Sure. It's okay for you?
Sure. I should have
now 24.
I should have asked you to vote on what you think I'm drinking, but I won't. I think, Isan, we can go with the number of results.
Sure. So we had 24 responses, and one people responded as they're the first grade, first year, and six people were second year, and eight people were third year, and 2 people were for fourth year. And over fifth year, we have 5 people. And someone responded as, how many years do you think we go to school? So that's also a philosophical approach to this question, I think.
That's pretty funny. Okay, well, so that's a nice distribution of folks who are more junior and more senior. So hopefully this content that we've put together will be relevant to all of you because we thought about the whole continuum. I really appreciated that you folks, and a lot of folks, even more than are on the call, responded to our questions about what you really want to learn about. And Isan and Iram and the team were very kind to break it up into 2 different groupings. One was, I think you guys called it the educational environment. I changed it to the learning environment. And one was sort of more about the student themselves. And these were the themes that emerged. And there was a lot of consistency. And it's really interesting. I'm going to make a comment about what faculty are thinking about in a minute. But all of these things are struggles that I've not only heard as a result of our needs assessment here for this session, but in conversations that I've had with friends, conversations that I've had with students that I know, and also just watching social media, because these are the struggles that people are having. And by the way, not only within medicine and healthcare, but across the board, all students are struggling. So I've sort of prepared the responses within the context of this presentation. Hopefully it'll be helpful. But you can see everything from transforming the traditional curriculum, which relies almost exclusively on face-to-face and hands-on, into a more digital delivery. And how does that impact your ability to move along the continuum towards graduation and entry into practice? And then how does that really change how you interact with faculty? And by the way, how does faculty interact with you? And a big struggle that I know you guys are having is how do you deal with the clinical hands-on skills that you need to be perfecting and you can't perfect right now? One of the things that comes up not as often, but is important, is testing environments. So how do you take exams? How do you know the exams are secure? So it's an interesting thing. The themes that came out more about students and roles were how do you adjust to the environment that you're in? And what are the roles that the students should be taking right now? And there's a lot of these questions that are coming up. And certainly staying motivated is challenging. And if you live by yourself or just a couple of people together and you're in a place where movement is restricted, where I live, it becomes a bit of a challenge. And then how do you maintain your regular student life in an environment where everything has changed? So I'm going to address all of these things moving forward. Interestingly, over the last couple of weeks, I led 2 webinars aimed at faculty through the Amy platform. And these are the themes that came up. And this is a slide from my last webinar. And I brought this up to say, you know what? They're asking the same kinds of questions. How can they transform an environment that they're comfortable in, the face-to-face environment, into new media? And how do they use the right platform so that it works for you and works for them? And how can they engage you? And how can they engage each other and their colleagues? And how do they make sure the education is working? So it's interesting. There's a lot of conversation and a lot of faculty development that's going on all over the world. And there's a lot of questions from the students. But I don't see a lot of opportunities for students and faculty to sort of chat together. And Isan, we may want to talk about that, and we may be able to create a conversation between students and faculty, because everybody's having the same struggles, but maybe they're not aware that the other one is having it. Now, I'm going to ask you now, those are the 2 big categories, and those are the themes. If there's anything else that you think we didn't cover as we put together this content, you can enter it into the chat box now. And Isan, if anything jumps out at you that it's a topic that we didn't cover in that list, or something that you think requires some special coverage, let me know. I'll give you guys a chance to sort of type into the chat box now. When you're typing into the chat box, make sure you're either typing to everyone or directly to Isan or Iram, because they're the ones who are looking at it, monitoring it for me. And I'll give it a minute or 2, Isan, and you can let me know if nothing's coming in. I can move on even faster.
Well, I'm also waiting.
And it's okay. You know, if nothing else comes up, that's fine. We tried to be comprehensive. But I also want to make sure, as I said earlier, that we're engaging you, and that the 33 of you, or however many there are on right now, are getting the specific questions answered that you came here with. So it's sort of the goal of all of us, is to make sure we answer the questions that you have. But Isan, you could let me know if anything comes up as we move on. I'm going to move into the first of those 2 sections, which is the learning environment. And I think a lot of us are thinking about when we woke up and we found out that COVID-19 was changing the way we had to learn. We got a little concerned, because we were thinking, well, we have structure, we know that we have lectures, we know that we have labs, we know that we have simulation, we know that we have clinical rotations, and it's very structured, and we know what's ahead of us. And we're now turning it into a very unstructured, undefined world, and we're trying to make sure that we get to our goal, because everything's timed, without having to penalize anybody to spend additional time in school or have to do extra work to make up for what was missed. So let's look a little bit at the learning environment. I think one of the things to bear in mind is that this situation is causing us to be innovative. Innovative as faculty and innovative as students. And I love this definition of innovation and this definition of disruption. Innovation is doing the same things a bit better or a bit different, right? And then we have to do these new things. And it may well be that because we made these changes and these changes grew, will actually lead to changes in the way things will happen. And on Twitter just today, somebody asked me what I thought medical education was going to look like later. Is it going to go back to what it was? And I said, no, I think it's going to be better. I think we're going to find ways to take advantage of what we're learning here with digital platforms and asynchronous and synchronous learning, and put together a curriculum down the road that takes the best of both worlds and makes it a better learning environment for you guys and a better teaching environment for us. So I think that this was just pushing us towards the change. We had to do it quicker. Maybe we weren't as prepared as we had to be, but certainly we're doing. So one of the themes that emerged is what's going to happen to the curriculum. And I think certainly in some places there was not enough focus and content about public health. And I can tell you here in the United States, I think we will see a greater focus and a little bit more emphasis placed on some of the public health issues in our curriculum. And I'm sure that's the case worldwide, because I think we're learning by watching reading the lay press and watching TV, and we're hearing the public health experts that maybe we weren't interacting with before, but I think public health is going to take a bigger role. And I think what's being taught and how it's being taught and who is being is going to change. You know, the head of Amy, Ron Harden, wrote a book on the evolving roles of the medical. And I think a lot of what's in that book is what our medical teachers are going to have to do. They're going to have to be far more resilient. They're going to have to be more about guiding rather than being just the expert. And I think the content and the way content is taught will change, but I also think some of our faculty development is going to change as well. And I bet you if you guys were surveyed, or if we asked you in a focus group, if you thought there were things that your faculty did well and things that your faculty would need to change and update or improve, you'd come up with a list of things. And I think we're going to see that. The great thing about what we're seeing now is the explosive use of technology. So I can tell you that here in the United States, telehealth was happening, but not to a great extent. Now it's front and center. So I think we're going to see telehealth and e-learning and use of resources and engagement and connectivity and building communities of learners all happening as a result of this. And I think it's going to make the curriculum better. And I think the lessons that we're learning are going to transform into bigger experiences. And the lessons that we'll be giving to you downstream will now not just be, here's what you need to know about the, the PCA and the generation of energy, right? I think it's going to be a focus on the why, the application, and it's going to be an experience in how we're going to explain it to you and the resources we're going to use. I think it's all going to benefit you and the students that come after. So I have a second polling question here. So Isan's ready to send out another link. And I do this, by the way, to keep you guys engaged and awake and to know that not only to find out what it is that you need to know, but I'm really interested to know if your school was already using e-learning resources and delivery prior to this whole pandemic and didn't have to change very much, or they needed to change much. So you could see the choices that I wrote. Yeah, we were doing it regularly all the time, or yeah, we were doing it a little bit. No, but I found e-learning resources. So choice 3 is more of, it wasn't offered to me, but I found it. And choice 4 is no, and I don't want it. So if you could vote now, that'd be pretty helpful.
So I've sent the link, and right now we have 14 people answered, 15 and counting.
So Isan, I must give you credit. It's working.
Yay.
It's interesting because one of the questions that the faculty asked me was, which platform for e-learning and delivery is best? And my answer was, sometimes you have to blend and combine platforms rather than hope that one platform will do everything that you need. This is a perfect example of it. And in fact, if I give another webinar, I will use this as the case study. So So thanks to you again. What are our results, my
So 25 people answered, and unfortunately, wait, yes, 26. Sorry. So for yes regularly, three people answered as yes regularly, and 13 people answered as yes intermittently, and nine people answered as no, but I found other e-learning resources. And only one person answered as no, I don't use any e-learning resources.
Well, thank you. And thank you for your honesty. And I think that's a really interesting split because we're going to see a shift. And if we ask this question a year from now, I bet you far more people will be using or selecting choice one. Choice two is what I expected to be. I didn't know it would be half, but I expected it to be the largest vote. And I am thrilled because the generation of student that you are digital natives. And if e-learning and other digital resources aren't given to you, you go out and find it. And that's a really great thing. So congratulations to you if that was your choice. And hopefully the environment that we're evolving into is one that's going to be far more familiar and comfortable for you. So when you think of e-learning, there's a lot going on Zoom right now, and I saw this picture, and it just struck me that every Zoom meeting that I participate in, I think there's somebody who has a face like the one on the bottom right, which is have your headset on. In fact, Isan, that could be you, right? Because that's what you looked like before. And then all these other people have these stunned looks on their faces. And I saw something on Instagram the other day where somebody was participating in a Zoom meeting for her company, and she did something and she turned herself into a potato, and then she couldn't figure out how to turn herself back from a potato. So I think while there's great opportunity to use some of these platforms, there's a huge need to do training of the faculty and of the students, and we can't assume that everybody can do it all at the same time. Now, we do know, and as you guys voted, that many schools are at least sometimes using digital capture, delivery, and resources. I know there was a school here in the US that um, switched to digitally recording all of their lectures, and attendance in the live lectures went down, but the average test grades went up. So there were people who did better by watching an archived version asynchronously at the time that was suited for them, and so there's some value in learning from those data. I also think that the opportunity for bringing in some new technologies will change, and we're going to integrate them in a better format and a better time within the curriculum so that we're using digital resources, if not replacements, better. And I really think faculty need to really think about how to link the content that they're presenting with the resources that either they know about or, quite frankly, you guys can help them to learn. And faculty should be open to hearing and asking you, where do you go to get the additional content? You know, we're in an environment now where there is no shortage of information, where we all go online to find out answers to questions that come up. But if we find really good resources, we need to share it with each other. We also need to share it with faculty because the faculty need to start curating content and making sure that they're providing something that one person found to the rest. And I think that's a really a lot of questions came up about how will this whole situation impact my ability to move on to my next year, to move on to um, uh, from preclinical to clinical and from clinical to junior doctor. And I think we're still trying to figure this out. But no one, as I said earlier, is going to penalize it. There's no simple answer. But I think everybody is working collectively to help you and to support you to move on through your form of education. And no matter what it is that you're doing now, as a result or in response to the pandemic, you're learning more and you're learning things that you would not have learned otherwise. So I take it as an opportunity to add to what you would have learned rather than replace what you would have learned. we've seen some people in schools graduate early. As long as all of the boxes were able to be ticked, we're graduating these students earlier. I know my friend at the Federation of State Medical Boards here has seen a huge increase in the number of people launched from medical school into training programs early to help deal with the response to the pandemic. And that's been great. And, you know, testing has been a challenge. So from the faculty's perspective, they worry that the testing environment isn't as secure as they'd like it to be. And from your perspective is you need to make sure that you can take your exams because that's a required step before you can progress on. And I think we're all working together to make sure that you can take tests, prove your competence and knowledge, and move on. Certainly when we have clinical skills involved, it's very difficult, but there was a great presentation and paper in MedEd published by Kathy Borsicott focusing on how can they do the OSCE exam in this challenging environment. So I promise you that there's research going on now, and there's a lot of focus from the faculty side in making sure that you'll be able to take the test that you need to take and that it doesn't hamper you from being able to move on and move. And then happily, somebody asked a question about what topics in MedEd research will be emerging as a result of this pandemic. And I think we need to think about topics and we need to think about environment. So the topics are in that little box at the bottom where how do the students progress? How do the faculty and students demonstrate resilience? How are we coping with and finding new methods for assessment? There's so many topics we can do. And then how does it impact faculty and students? How are specialists responding in this environment? You know, there's a lot of plastic surgeons and other specialists who can't perform their regular tasks, and they're stepping up and stepping in. I know a very famous neurologist who specializes in multiple sclerosis went back and he said, took a crash course in how to work in the ITU, and he's been seeing COVID patients in the ITU. So the specialists are having to respond as well, and it'd be really interesting to study how the changing roles of those specialists temporarily impacted their ability to care for patients. It's really interesting stuff. And so there's a lot of research. And I think if this is something that you're interested in, you can think of a really you can think of a wealth of research topics, and I'm sure there's no shortage of mentors that would love to work with you on how to do that. And you know, monitoring sort of longitudinally changes in curriculum and changes in content and changes in delivery. Those are all going to be very interesting. And I guarantee at the medical education conferences over the next 2 or 3 years, we're going to see a lot of the best practices and case studies of what happened during this pandemic, and see what we can learn from them. So I think, first of all, thank you for whoever asked the question about research. We always like to hear that you guys are interested in research, but we're also interested to see how we can help you and support that research. Now, that was a very quick run through of the topics that had come up, focusing on the learning environment. And before I move into the specific roles of you guys as students, and I'm very aware of the time, and I'll make sure we finish on time, I want to make sure that if any questions came up based on what I just said, or if I didn't cover something enough, I want to make sure that I do that for you. So the chat box is open, and Iram and Isan are looking at it, and so I'm going to give you a minute or two while I take a sip of my ginger-flavored soda water, and you can ask some questions now. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions at the end as well.
So for a quick briefing, Lawrence, someone said that the sound is extremely low and it's barely audible. So a little feedback, let's say. And other than that, if anyone have any questions, you can directly chat them from the chat box.
Well, let me ask you this question, Isan. Is my sound low to you as well?
Not that much. I can hear, but it could be better, let's say.
Okay. Well, I will yell and scream to the best of my ability because I want to be heard. So thank you for that feedback. And while people are typing, Ethan, we can hold those questions if they come in, and I'll move on. See, Ethan, it was 2016.
Yes.
But this is a picture of the Amy Student Task Force from 2016, and I never, um, I never stopped being amazed by the quality of the students that join the Amy Student Task Force every year, and it's very competitive. I mean, thousands of people apply for the relatively few slots that are there, and I encourage all of you. There won't be a live Amy conference this year, but I promise you we'll be back next year. And we want to make sure that we do it. And I know a couple of you have had the experience of being on the task force. And I think anybody who has an interest in medical education. Now, I use this picture to transition, and we go on to students and their roles. So one of the questions, or a couple of the questions that came in focused on what are the students doing now in response to this. And so I looked around and talked to some of my colleagues around the world, and this is what I've heard. So the more junior students, and we had a nice distribution, have stepped in, and they're doing things like childcare and other assistance for some of the clinical workers because their children, the clinical practitioners, the consultants, nurses, and the other folks, their children can't go to school. So they're being homeschooled. So there's nobody to take care of those children. So the junior students, in some cases, have set up childcare services or little groups, and they're able to help so that people can get to work and they don't have to worry about who's going to watch the children. We've seen some of the more senior students and some of the junior trainees taking on non-COVID-19 tasks so that it frees up people to do the COVID-19 related tasks. And when you're in that peak, when you're in that surge, and you need everybody who can and who has the ability, who's trained to focus in on managing the COVID-19 patients, then the other tasks can be picked up by the senior students. I tell you, everybody that I spoke to appreciates everybody who has stepped in. As I mentioned earlier, we've seen specialists in GP taking on roles where they're actually helping to manage those COVID-19 patients, even though they're not intensivists or anesthesiologists, emergency medicine, but they're saying, all right, listen, I learned this and I did this before, I can do it again, let me help. Because in some places, I can tell you, I'm a native New Yorker, I live outside of Washington, D.C. Most of my friends and family in New York, and I can tell you that for quite a while it's been overwhelming. And people are working double shifts and triple shifts, and when they get a little bit of relief and when they get a little bit of help, they really, really appreciate it. So I know that that's really important. And you know, if you guys have heard of other things that's being done by other students, please share that because I'd like to know, and maybe we can share that and follow. Then there were a couple of questions about how to stay fresh, how to stay engaged. And so I broke it up into two. Here, how do you stay fresh as learners and learning about knowledge, improving your skills, and keeping your attitude up? And so some of the things that we recommend are peer-to-peer support. So you're not alone in struggling with what it is that you're trying to learn and do and engage. And so we really encourage peer-to-peer support, but we also encourage you, and we encourage the faculty to maintain or even grow the interactions to make sure that there's check-ins and checkpoints and that you're able to meet the goals that you need to, and that you're able to focus on things so faculty can give you topics to think about or can give you help you form a plan of how you can continue to study. And you should look for other things. And many of you said, right, that if resources weren't given to you, you went out and you found them. But it's really important that you think about how you learn. And the predispose, enable, reinforce model is you create your own teachable moment. You say, I need to know more about this. And then you find an educational resource that helps you to learn about it. It may be an interaction with a faculty. It may be a YouTube video. It may be something that one of your peers can share with you. And then find something that helps to remind you about that so that you have multiple sources of that information and education. And I strongly encourage you to think that through. Teachable moments can be created or teachable moments can be found, right? So as you're reading, as you're watching a video, as you're engaging with other people, something you don't know or something that you didn't realize or something that you had wrong comes up, and that's that teachable moment. And it's okay because that creates the opportunity for you to learn. So if the learning environment is not supporting you through direct teaching, you can create that opportunity to stay engaged. And I strongly encourage you guys to find mentors to guide you through certainly the skill-based learning, because that's a question that comes up all the time. You're missing out on the hands-on training, but you may be able to at least talk through some things and work through some virtual simulations and work through a variety of resources, different approaches or tactics, so that at least you can have conversations about it so that you're prepared when you get back into the environment to be able to work on your clinical. And then some questions came up a lot about motivation. And I think, just so you know, everyone, whether they're in healthcare or otherwise, whether they're faculty or students in practice, parents and children, are struggling with staying motivated because it really is a challenging environment. So some of the things that I like to recommend is stick to that routine that you had before. You know, a lot of people are saying, boy, I love this because I don't have to get out of my sweats, and, you know, sweats are my new everyday outfit. Now, maybe as a student, that was it, but it may also be that getting up, taking a shower first thing, working out if you can in your own environment, going for a walk, something that gets you stimulated to keep you going and engaged. I think it's really important that you do that. You have the opportunity, if you haven't already done so, to form virtual study groups. And you could do this using a variety of techniques. I like study buddies. I like when you sort of team up with people, like-minded people, and you really help and support each other. But you could do it through WhatsApp or WeChat or any form of digital broadcast. You know, Zoom is incredibly popular now. I think a year ago, if you would have said Zoom, nobody would have known what it was. Now everybody knows what it was. And I'm a big fan of social media. You could have closed groups on social media or even open groups or global groups or tweet chats or something that you're looking forward to. And then I strongly encourage you to make time for virtual social interaction. And so I've had virtual meals with people. I've had lots of chats. I've done some gaming. You can do virtual exercise. I just got an invitation just yesterday to have a virtual dinner party. So 3 couples are invited to get together and all have their cameras on and have the same kind of conversation they would have had they been sitting around a table in a restaurant. Equally important, guys, is to reach out individually to those people who may not be as likely to participate in the group activities. Those are the ones you got to make sure you're engaging. Because it's not that they don't want to engage, but they may not engage the same way some of us that are more social will engage. And always, always, always take mental and physical breaks. You've got to stay in shape. You know, there's a lot of jokes going around social media that at the end of this pandemic, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to have to lose a lot of weight because all they're doing is sitting home and eating. So I think it's really important that we think about that as well. But in general, think about being resilient. I know it's an overused word in some situations, but we really need to think about how we can have our own internal resilience. So if someone's asked to graduate early, look at it as embracing your new career sooner. If you're having to adapt to a new learning environment, help the faculty make these new learning environments better. Most faculty will be receptive to learning from you. You know, a good mentoring relationship is bidirectional. You're going to learn from them and they're going to learn from you. If you're feeling confined, find ways to make your day better for you and for other people, because whatever you're feeling, I'm pretty sure somebody else is feeling as well. And then, as I mentioned just a minute ago, if you're missing that hands-on training, find an opportunity to reinforce the knowledge and competence necessary to form those skills so that you're so super ready when you're able to do them again. And if you're concerned about your progress, more early than late, reach out to faculty and have them work with you to set personal goals. They really want to guide you through this. So I think it's really important that you remember to engage them. And I've encouraged faculty to remember this as well, because they're all struggling converting content and learning new platforms and everything. I said, don't forget, the students are out there, and once you sort of flip the light switch and everything changes, they have to be able to respond as well. So something to think about. You can engage your faculty like you can engage students. So we're coming towards the close of this, and we're really figuring this out together. There's no easy answer. There wasn't a toolkit to break out and say, okay, in case of pandemic, open, and here's the new way we're going to teach medical and other health profession students. We're trying to figure it out together, and everybody has a role to figure out how best to make this work. And I bet you if you have a good idea and you share it, it will be appreciated. So I'll give you a chance to type in some other questions. Isan and Iram, I guess you're monitoring that chat box. But I'd really like to know if there's anything else you'd like me to cover. And I know that there's some sound issues. I promise you I am yelling. And I'm in an environment where it should be echoing as well. So I'm sorry if you can't hear it that well.
Right now we have a question. Yay. So the question comes from Madalena Valache. Do you think that e-learning will improve the quality of medical studies? And how is the best to do so? This is a general question, actually.
Yeah, and I love it. So I can tell you historically that in continuing education, where we saw e-learning come in slowly and then explode, it really did increase the quality of continuing education. Here's why I think so, and here's why I think it'll help all along the continuum. I think we need to think more like flipped classrooms. We need to think more about how do we use additional resources. So I don't see e-learning replacing the traditional curriculum, but I see appropriately developed and implemented e-learning supplementing and making our curriculum better. So it may be that some of the more didactic content can be scaled back, and some more interactive e-learning can be built in as a part of it. And really, I think back when I was a student, going to the library was the big thing. I think now we should be able to use our digital devices, whether it's a handheld device or a laptop, to really enhance our learning experiences. So the answer is, it will make it better, but it's our job collectively as faculty and students to make sure that we find the right tactics, the right platforms, and the right timing to integrate the e-learning in there, not to replace, but to enhance.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions about all the presentation, I think?
By the way, guys, I know it's late for most of you. It's okay if you don't have a ton of questions. You could always follow up and ask me questions individually. I have no problem with that. And I don't take it as a bad sign if there's no question. I take it as it's almost 9 o'clock at night in Central Europe.
So I see no questions right now, Lawrence.
Okay, so let's open polling question number 3. And this is important because as educators, it's important for us to evaluate. And so we'd like to know whether you found this webinar helpful because it gave new ideas and information, or it reinforced what you already knew, or you know what, it didn't provide anything new and helpful, but we liked you anyway. I just added that last part. So Isan, you can share that link.
Yes, I shared the link. It's in the chat box right now, and we have 11 responses and counting.
Mm-hmm. If the results are really bad, you can make up good numbers.
So no, they're going good right now.
I'm kidding, by the way. You know, negative feedback is sometimes more helpful than positive feedback. And once you
So
reach a
to
critical number, I think you can share the results when you feel it's the appropriate time.
okay, so 10 people said that yes, it provided new ideas and information, and 10 people answered as yes, it's reinforced what we already knew, and 2 people said that no, it did not provide anything new or help.
Well, for the 20 people that said yes, thank you. And for the other 2 people, feel free to let me know what else I can help you with so that I can turn the no to a yes. The last thing that would really help us is if you could use the chat box and share one thing that you'll take away from this webinar. So at least 20 of you said yes, either yes, there's something new, or yes, it reinforced. So if each of you could just share one thing that was either new or that was reinforced, it would be helpful so that we could see which part of the content was most relevant. And then feel free to reach out on Twitter. And remember, there's my Twitter handle, which is Medicate. And use that hashtag if you remember that we created for this.
We have a question, I think. Yes. Um, how we can make our teachers think that the same about e-learning? Yeah, this is the question.
Yeah, so, you know, I think I do a lot of faculty development. And, you know, there's a bell-shaped curve in any group that you're going to look at. And so I think it's always best to try to find a faculty champion in an institution who already buys into it, or someone who's willing to listen and learn. But I think that the key is to go with a concrete example of something that worked for you or worked for a group of you and say, here's something that we found that we use that we think is good, and here's why, and here's where we think it can help. If you just go up and you say to faculty, hey, you should use more e-learning, that's not really helpful for them because one, they may not know what you need, and two, they may have no time to go out and do a ton of research to see what's right. But if you can go in and say, this is good, this is what good looks like, then I think they'll appreciate that, and you'll have probably a little bit easier time getting them to consider using other platforms.
I think we have a question, I think a request for explanation. Predispose, enable, reinforce model.
Mm-hmm. So it's something I'm selfishly going to say that we published about in Medical Teacher in 2018. The model that's used a lot in continuing education. And basically predispose means create that teachable moment or identify the teachable moment. It's the why, right? Why is this piece of information, why is this clinical skill, why is this topic important? And it may come from conversations that you're having, it may come from reading, it may come from an assignment, but there's that teachable moment. So it means your brain is ready to receive that information. Then the enable is the education that you find, or as faculty that we would deliver to make that learning happen, right? So if you say, boy, I'm not aware of the appropriate application of guidelines in management and treatment of hypertension in diabetic patients, right? And that's the predisposing. Then the enabling is finding education or information on that topic. You found an archived webinar. Maybe you found a YouTube video. Maybe you found an online course from another school. That's the enabling. The reinforcing is see if you can find other opportunities to help build on what you learned, right? So as faculty, we might give you a reminder. As faculty, we might say, listen to this 2-minute webinar. So you may be able to find an additional piece of information help reinforce that information that you just learned through the enabling. So what you're doing is you're playing the role of your self-teacher, right? And so you're saying, I need to make sure I understand why it's important. I need to find something that helps me understand it. And I need to find something that reinforces why that learning happens.
So we have a couple of questions, and the first one. I'm not sure if this is a proper question, but I wonder which e-learning courses you suggest as a professional in medical education. Any particular ones?
Yeah, it's a question I can't answer because there's too many sources of e-learning and there's too many platforms and they go across the spectrum. So what I would say is it's important to know that what I think is good, you may not think is good. So I think we each have our own definition of good. What I would say also is if you find something that's good, you should share it so that we as a community of learners and a community of educators can benefit from what you learn. I think things to use as criteria to grade what's good is, was it the right faculty? Was it the right content? Was it the right duration? And did it provide opportunities for engagement, interaction, and feedback? So if you have to sit and watch a 2-hour audio over slides presentation without any break, without any opportunity to interact, I think that's probably not as good in my definition of good as something that's maybe shorter, but opportunities to either asynchronously interact with faculty or put in answers to questions, or I really like e-learning that has branching so that if they present you with a clinical case or a preclinical question, your answer guides you to the next step. So I think those are the things and qualities that make good e-learning, but I'll stop short of saying this platform is better than that.
We have another question. What changes can be made to medical education to reduce the no-do gap of physicians?
The no-do gap of physicians?
No and do gap.
Oh, I see. So, it's a specific, it's a learner-specific challenge rather than a curriculum-specific challenge. I think we as medical educators have to do a good job at assessing those learners who have that gap between knowing something and doing something. It's the difference between competence and confidence. And sometimes we have to do a better job of teaching to the confidence as well as the competence. You can know something and understand it, but stop short of doing it for a variety of reasons. We have to make sure that we as educators support you as learners, either students or physicians or other healthcare professionals, to get across that gap, because it's as harmful to know something and not do and act on it as it is to not know something and then do the wrong thing.
So we have a comment. One thing I will take from this webinar is it's a big crisis, but a bigger chance to reshape, change medical education altogether as students and medical faculties.
Well, I love that one.
So right now we do not have any other questions or comments. It's time to say thank you, I think.
I think I did.
Ah.
Well, thank you to everybody for your participation, for your engagement, and Isan and Iram, thank you first for the invitation, and second for supporting me so well in the preparation and the delivery.
So we also thank you to helping us through the whole process, being in a good communication, and also this great presentation. And also, I would like to thank everyone who has attended for the good questions, for the good comments, and in total your interests. We will have a follow-up Google form probably tomorrow or in a couple of days. So I also would like to take your feedback as for this webinar and then the following webinars that we're planning to. Thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you so much, Lawrence, for this great presentation. And hope we will get over this crisis all together with medical students and medical teachers.
I hope so.
So thank you, everyone. Have a good night. Have a good evening. Have a good day, Lawrence.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.